Right. So, what we discussed in reference to the advanced level of microservices, in reference to the implementation part. Yesterday, of course, in the last session, I have given an introduction.
Authorization and authentication, the resource server and
Right.
other,
So
yeah,
we discussed about the roles, right? So different
yeah,
roles I have discussed with you.
yeah.
So followed by the kind of roles and all that, even I discussed about, of course, initially I started with the introduction about the framework, OAuth framework 2.0. In continuation to that, I have discussed about what are the different roles which are involved in it. So majorly focusing on implementation of OAuth 2.0 in advanced level microservices, right? So that's what we have discussed in the earlier session. Am I right,
Yes, yes,
Aishwarya? Right?
yes.
Now, in reference to the implementation in the project level, okay? Because if you want to implement this in reference to the project level, especially whenever we are implementing the microservices, etc. Because generally, whenever we are working on implementation of microservices projects, they'll have different services we implement. Multiple services and all everything is what something we will be implementing in regular intervals. But when it comes to the services, whatever we implement, usually all the services contains different resources, whatever are essentially required. So whatever the kind of resources which are essentially needed, what are to be included in the existing implementation of OAuth 2.0 framework and all everything is what important first. So there are some steps being into microservices project implementations, which we must be knowing. So first of all, please write down some steps. There are steps that are to be implemented.
Okay.
Actually, please make a note.
Yeah,
Steps
yeah.
that are implemented, that are required, steps that are required to implement, that are
So this
required
is
to implement.
under, one second, this is
This is
under,
under this is separate. This is separate. Whatever I'm saying, this is relating to microservices projects. Means when we are implementing microservices projects, I'm explaining this to you.
okay.
Steps
Yeah,
that are implemented. This is a separate point, which is not something connecting to the one which was explained earlier to you.
okay,
Okay.
okay.
Because earlier, what is that I have explained you about the framework, followed by roles and all, right? Like resource owner, authorization server, resource server, right? Client application, all that we have discussed.
Yes.
In that, we have discussed the first one, which is called resource owner.
Resource server, yeah.
Right? That's what we have discussed and all. Now, when it comes to the implementation level from the microservices projects, so what are the steps to be taken into consideration is what something we need to know first. Okay. Now,
Yeah.
please make a note. The first one, in reference to the implementation of microservices projects,
In reference to the,
first point, in that first one,
okay, okay.
microservices consists of, one minute,
Second.
please be online, just 2 minutes. Yeah, sorry. Right. So what we have discussed was that, right? So we have discussed about that part. Now, in reference to the microservices implementation of the projects, first of all, write down the first point.
Yeah.
In implementation, first point, in implementation,
Yes.
microservices
Mm.
consists of microservices consists of
Consist of
multiple resources, multiple
yes.
resources. You can write on the first point, right? In
Yeah.
reference to the microservices projects is concerned, there are different multiple services we have, and every service contains few resources. Now, second point, if we want to manage resources, and if we want to manage resources,
Mm.
followed by required any protection, right, followed by required any protection,
Mm.
this is where this is where resource server come into picture, because the next role is called resource server, right?
Okay.
Understood? Clear? The first one
Yes.
we discussed about resource owner. The one which we are discussing now about resource server. Understood? Clear? Aishwarya,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Now, generally, whenever we are implementing these services, yeah, actually all the services we have resources, because to manage and as well as to protect these resources and all, what is that we require is called resource server. Okay. Now, next point, resource server is the one. Resource server is the one
Yes.
which will be used to protect the
Yes.
resources through validating the tokens.
Which will be used to protect that resources
Resources through validating the tokens.
Tokens. Okay.
Right? Validating the tokens.
Mm.
But
Mm.
when it comes to
Mm.
authorization server,
Mm.
it has an advantage, especially in advanced level. It has an advantage
Mm.
of creating
Of creating
a common token,
common token.
token for all the microservices.
Mm.
Understood?
Yes.
Right? So this is what generally the advantage we can see, especially in context to the authorization server is itself is concerned. It has an advantage we have in reference to the implementation of authorization server is that when we are implementing any tokens, normally we create multiple tokens for multiple microservices, all that. That's what generally we do. But when it comes to the authorization server is concerned, whenever we are implementing, one authorization server is enough to us, so that whatever the multiple microservices and all, we can create one common token for all the ones. Understood? Right?
Yeah.
So, hence, next paragraph, right, you can write it. Hence,
Yeah.
implementing application server which is independent
Mm.
and also
and also
uh, and also have a separate and also have a separate
and also have a separate
resource server for every microservice. Resource server for every microservice.
sir.
Understood, right?
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to the, I'm just highlighting the points. When we are implementing the microservices projects and all, in reference to the resource server is concerned, resource server is the one which is majorly used by us to protect whatever the resources we are managing and all. For the protection purpose, this is all something it is being used. But whenever there is a protection is required, so validating the tokens and all everything is what something we have an advantage. But when it comes to the implementation of authorization server itself is concerned, one creation of tokens and token or one common token for all the microservices are enough for us to implement all that. Understood, right? So that
Yes.
this is where generally we do in reference to the resource server is concerned. Okay. Next, when it comes to the next role, you can write on the next role. Next role is called the first one we discussed already.
Resource
First
owner.
one is resource owner was discussed, resource server. Next is authorization server we have discussed. Next thing is client application, right? Client application. Or any like any third party application, I meant to say, right? Any third party application you can see over here. Third party
Okay.
application. Yeah. When it comes to now third party application, right? So client application
Yeah.
we are discussing now. Aishwarya.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, client application we are discussing. When it comes
Yes.
to the client application,
When it comes to the client application. Yeah.
which protect the required, which protect
Which protect the
resources, which protect the resources request, resources request on behalf of the resource owner.
on behalf of
On behalf of the resource owner. This is applicable.
This is applicable.
This is applicable.
Yeah, this is applicable.
1 minute. Yeah, this is applicable, especially when we are implementing authorizations.
Authorizations. Okay.
Understood, clear?
Yeah.
Authorizations, right? So this is where generally when it comes to the implementation of client application itself is concerned. So when we are implementing advanced level microservices, especially when it comes to the OAuth 2.0 is concerned. So there are 4 roles as I stated. One is about the resource owner who manages the resources, etc. At the same time, resource server, which protects the resources, whatever we are managing by validating the keys, right? So validating the tokens, all that. At the same time, when it comes to the authorization server will create a single token for all the microservices, because in spite of creating multiple tokens for multiple things, it's always enough for us to, it's enough for us to create one single token for all the microservices. This is all about. When it comes to the client application itself is concerned, this is the one which majorly protects the resource request and all on behalf of the resource owner and all everything is all about. So these are the different roles which normally we see when it comes to the OAuth 2.4 framework is concerned. When we are trying to implement, these are the 4 things which we have to be known with. Understood?
Yes.
Clear?
Mm.
Right? Aishwarya,
Yes.
are you clear?
Yes.
Right? Right. Now, the next point about client registration that I am going to discuss tomorrow. So what about client registration? How to do the client registration and all?
Mm.
So followed by client registration and all, how to identify the clients, right? So how the client identification will be done. Followed by client authentications. At the same time, what are the different protocol endpoints are we going to use, especially when we are implementing OAuth, right? So at the same time, if you want to provide any OAuth approvals and all that, how do we do that? So by understanding the token endpoints, right? So all these things I'm going to discuss. At the same time, majorly protocol flow. OAuth protocol flow is also one of the key a key element whenever the client application request we do. This OAuth framework protocol flow is required that I am going to discuss in tomorrow's session. Is it
Okay.
clear?
Yeah.